Hello everyone. I'm not worshipping with you today in the church. I am worshipping with you from a home down by the sea. So a different kind of church. We managed to get the children away for a few days before the lockdown, and so we've decided to stay for a little bit longer to fatten them up with some beauty before we take them home into the next long time of lockdown. I was wondering about what I could possibly say to you all, my beautiful people, with this recent news. And I was thinking about the words from a poem by Christina Rossetti, which was turned into a beautiful carol about the winter and about the dark. In this poem, Christina is asking, what can I possibly give to Jesus? What can I give to this brand new baby born into the stable? The poem goes, in the bleak midwinter, frosty winds made moan. Earth stood hard as iron, water like a stone. Snow had fallen, snow on snow on snow, in the bleak midwinter, oh so long ago. Some would say that Christ is born every day, incarnate in us if only we can say yes. Which means that every day we are called to give to each other and to our world all that we have, because our God is here, not just in some stable from a long time ago. So in our bleak midwinter, frosty wind made moan, how can we hold when we cannot touch to know that we are not alone? What can I give you? Poor that I am. If I were a shepherd, I would give a lamb. If I were a wise man, I would do my part. Yet what can I give you? I can give my heart. So when we worship, we open our hearts. We open our hearts to each other and to our God. This is our sacred work. So in this deep midwinter, this midwinter of lockdown for those of us in Melbourne, let's get to it. Let's do what we need to do to find our way through. Let us worship our God.
We acknowledge that we are sharing this worship from the land of the Wadawurrung people. We acknowledge their elders past and present, and we commit ourselves to walking alongside injustice with all the First Nations to achieve a just future for all.
Our reading today comes to us from John Wardlaw, who is going to share with us the story of a sower who goes out to sow a seed.
The Bible reading today is taken from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 13, verses 1 to 9, and then 18 to 23. That same day, Jesus went out and sat by the lakeside, where so many people had gathered around him that he had to get into a boat. He sat there, and all the people stood on the shore, and he told them many things in parables. He said, "A sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some of the seed fell along the footpath, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky ground, where it had little soil, and it sprouted quickly because it had no depth of earth. But when the sun arose, it was scorched, and as it had no root, it withered away. Some fell among the thistles, and the thistles grew up and choked it. And some of the seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop. Some 100-fold, some 60-fold, and some 30-fold. If you have ears, then hear. Hear then the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word that tells of the kingdom, but fails to understand it, the evil one comes and carries off what has been sown in their heart. That is the seed sown on the footpath. The seed sown on the rocky ground stands for the person who hears the word and accepts it at once with joy. It strikes no root in them, and they have no staying power. When there is trouble or persecution on account of the word, they quickly lose faith. The seed sown among the thistles represents the person who hears the word, but worldly cares and false glamour of wealth choke it, and it proves barren. The seed sown on the good soil is the person who hears the word and understands it. They do bear fruit and yield 100-fold, or 60-fold, or 30-fold. These are the words of faith. Thanks be to God.
Parable of the sower. Jesus tells a story about where a farmer sows her seeds. There is the rocky ground, hardened and dry and exposed. The seeds did not grow. There is the thorny ground, full of weeds, with no room for the seed, which sprouts but is choked by the weeds. Then there is the good soil, ground prepared and ready for the seed, with water, sun and nutrients. Here the seed grows and yields a crop. A parable allows us to think about how the story is relevant for our lives. If the good soil is us, what do we need to prepare us to grow in ways that reflect God's love? What are the nutrients that you need to flourish? What will you need to survive and thrive the challenges of another lockdown?
I was going to talk to you today about seeds. I was going to talk to you today about soil. And I was going to tell you how one of the greatest soil scientists of the 20th century, yes, because that is a thing, writes that it is almost impossible to give a precise definition of soil because, depending on where you are, the place's geological history and climate and the variety of plant and animal life that have lived and died there, soil will be completely different. And I was going to tell you how this scientist describes soil not as a thing, but as a web of relationships. I was going to tell you about all of this because today's story is about a sower who goes out to sow a seed. You may have heard this one before. I was going to tell you about the soil, the rocky soil, the hard soil, the thorn-covered soil, the soil that is ravaged by birds. And I was going to tell you that Jesus gives us this metaphor as a way to help us reflect on our hearts. The soil being our hearts, of course. But then the towers that go up were locked down. And the most vulnerable amongst us were shut up. And the food that went into these towers, it was the wrong type and it was out of date, and that all the babies were crying. And of how the refugees from the countries where the police come for you in the night were terrified by the dark shirts of the cops with the guns, and of how no warning was given. And of how the mother crammed into the 2-bedroom flat with her 7 children couldn't get to her grandma in the other tower who she cares for. And so no one can come to her now to help her get out of bed. And I thought about soil, and I thought about hearts, and I thought about stones. And I wondered, what does the heart of our city look like on this day? There is a woman who sows seeds, a woman who sows seeds for our church garden. And through her and in her, I see a God so steadfast, so earthed, that it makes me want to weep. Look, says this woman, her hands deep in the compost bins of the church, the bins that she has built and dug and turned and mulched and wormed. Look at this soil, rich chocolate, crumbling and warm. Apparently, soil is a mystery, even to soil scientists, because in it so many processes and elements and creatures have come together to create the conditions in which life can flourish and in which death can be cradled and transformed. Now, our church garden has grown a little wild under my care, a little unkept, a little prone to exposed soil and spinach gone to seed. But now, because of this woman, our garden glows as the plants rise up in happy rows. And I asked this woman if she would share with us a little of her work in our garden. She said, in the past 12 months, St Andrew's Produce Garden has been home to heading broccoli, ripening tomatoes, countless silver beet leaves, zucchinis, blooms of sunflowers, alyssum and poppies. Bees and rainbow lorikeets have popped in for the odd visit. When I am tending this garden, people often passing by comment on the plants, but they never mention the soil. To me, the star of the show is not the plants, but the soil. It includes bucket loads of compost, which is made from vegetables and fruit scraps and shredded paper and coffee grounds and cardboard mixed together. And given time, these ingredients form healthy soil. Healthy soil teems with bacteria and fungi and viruses and other microorganisms that help to store the carbon and to fend off plant diseases. And healthy soil grows food. Peter said to Jesus, Lord, you know all things. You must know that I love you. And Jesus said to Peter, feed my sheep. Part of the original hope of the architect who designed the high-rise towers was to lift the children out of the dirt. Not the soil, mind you, but the dirt. To lift the children out of the sickness and squalor of the slums and the tenements, and to place those children in boxes of air in the sky. And now this air in those towers and in those broken down lifts has been found to be tainted with the hacking and the smacking of a cough that can kill. And so the towers have been sealed off like plague ships from the past. Now, of course, in the words of Josh Lorenz, the Executive Director of Catholic Social Services, of course, the decision by the Victorian government to lock down particular housing estates was made swiftly and with the intention to benefit public health, both the health of the tenants of these buildings and the health of all of us in Victoria. And many of us, of course, including the residents of the towers, understand that these are exceptional circumstances and that this was an exceptional response, and that these lockdowns have been part of that essential response. But what is not so clear is why at the beginning of the lockdown, 500 law enforcement personnel were put on each shift. This was a ratio of 1 police officer to 6 residents in the towers. The Australian Services Union, whose members come from the social services sector, have condemned this law and order response put in place versus what should have been a health and social services response. Why so many police? Why so few social workers? Why are they treating us like criminals when we haven't committed a crime? It seems that our government did not trust the residents of the flats to be the good soil in which the good things grow. And that it was just assumed that those towers are filled with soil that is so fragile and so feckless that the only way that it could be contained was through massive police presence. I used to work at the flats in Carlton, and there was lots of loose and lost soil. And there were landslides and there was scorched dust bowls, but there was also salt. There was salt of the earth, salt of the soil, filled with the good nutrients that form the web of relationships. What does the soil of our city look like? Is it a soil where good things can grow? Well, maybe it looks a little like this. A government scrambling but not always getting it right. Seeds getting tangled and seeds getting burnt. And maybe it looks like this. Group after group, individual after individual, the Trades Hall movement, the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre, Street, who work with homelessness and youth, the Red Cross, the Australian Muslim Social Services Agency, the local churches, the youth workers, the mothers from the other suburbs, bundling nappies into boxes, the people holding up signs of hope, and the food, all the food that has been delivered by human chains of volunteers across faith and culture divides to make sure that our neighbours in the towers do not go hungry, and so that they know that they are not alone. And Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, you know that I love you." And Jesus said to Peter, "Feed my sheep." And so we did. Together, all of us together. Victoria's Housing Minister, Richard Wynne, said that he has been overwhelmed by the compassion of so many Victorians. Presently, he said, my phone is running off the hook with people saying, how can we help? So maybe we are not doing so badly after all, Melbourne. Maybe our hearts are not as stony as we feared. And maybe this lockdown time can be for us a time of composting all those things that we should have let go of a long, long time ago. Things like apathy and racism and fear of the poor and that smug sense of neoliberal self-sufficiency. It's time to let it go. Let it go, mulch it up, toss it about until it turns into a soil, all rich and fertile, into which new life can grow abundantly for all. Maybe. I've got a special treat for you today, which is another song by Ange on the ukulele. It's kind of like St Andrew's version of the organ. So thank you, Ange. Let's listen.
Hello. Today I'll sing We Shall Be Known by the duet Mamuse. It's a song that speaks about the great turning, an important idea in creation spirituality, so specifically the work of Joanna Macy. And many of you also know Matthew Fox very well, who works very closely with her. So it's called We Shall Be Known. I'll sing it a couple times so that people who don't know the song can join in. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now, it is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive in this great turning. We shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now, it is time now that we thrive. It is time to lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive in this great turning. We shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. Let's sing it one more time. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now, it is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive in this great turning. We shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love.
I have some extraordinary colleagues in the Uniting Church, and one of those is the Reverend Dr. Ji Zhang, who is the theologian for the Assembly. He wrote a prayer last week and it moved me deeply, and I asked if he would record it for us so that we could share in it together. I invite you to open your hearts and pray with Ji and pray with our people in the towers.
Peace of the Lord be with you all. Today I bring the prayer for the people before you from Melbourne. And we pray for the people in the lockdown areas. And I will first read Psalm 119 in my heart language. Then we will pray together. 你的话是我脚前的灯，是我路上的光。你公义的典章，我曾起誓遵守，我必按事而行。我曾是受苦，耶和华呀，求你照你的话将我救活。耶和华呀，求你悦纳我口中的赞美为供物，又叫你的典章教训我。我的性命藏在危险之中，我却不忘记你的律法。And let us join together in prayer. O Lord, your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. As in this week, we gather before you, holding a lamp to our feet, seeing a light to our path. In this light, we see people in lockdown areas in Melbourne. People are feeling trapped in tall buildings. Many others are afflicted. May your light shine in the darkness, strengthen them during the isolation. We pray for Victoria Government, placing a fence of protection so the virus will have its boundaries. O Lord, Maker of all lives, help us see the ordinance in your righteousness. Give our state leaders wisdom and strength. Keep each citizen in safety and hope. We pray for local communities as they feel the pain of this virus. For many, their weeks are filled with unwanted news. For some, their days are filled with unwanted thoughts. Free the people, O Lord, from this mental dip. Help us to reach out to them with words and gestures in kindness. O Lord, your words is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. Amen.
Our blessing today comes to us from the poet Jan Richardson, who is an extraordinary artist and a theologian. And it's not a blessing of comfort, but it is a blessing of power. It's called a blessing for when the world is ending. Look, the world is always ending somewhere. Somewhere the sun has come crashing down, somewhere it has gone unutterably dark. Somewhere it has ended with a slammed door, the shattered hope. Somewhere it has ended with utter quiet that follows the news from the phone or the television or the hospital room. Somewhere it has ended with a tenderness that will break your heart. The world is always ending somewhere. But listen, this blessing is not meant to be morose. It has not come to cause despair. It is simply here because there is nothing that a blessing is better suited for than an ending. Nothing that cries out for more of a blessing than when the world is falling apart. This blessing will not fix you. It will not mend you. It will not give you false comfort. This blessing will not talk to you about one door opening while another one closes. It will simply sit beside you among the shards and gently turn your face towards the light, which will come, gathering itself around you as the world begins again.